how those smirks and nods and eye rolls and laughs play on the split screen is another part of a debate. You don't see that here in the hall unless you're looking at a TV. But it is part of debating on this national stage. And how that plays with the American people is a big question. The other big question is, does it make a huge difference in this race? I think that most people would say that Mike Pence had a very good night tonight, but does it change the dynamic? Let's bring in our all-star
Heck yeah, you had a
Chris
good
Wallace, Brit Hume,
night.
Dana Perino, Juan Williams, Donna Brazil, and Carl Rove. Brit, I want to start with you. Get your thoughts on this debate.
Well, I had
You got three Democrats there, I see.
What you and Martha have been saying about the strength of Mike Pence's performance, it's worth noting perhaps that part of the reason why he was strong was that he kept ignoring the moderator's appeals to him to limit his time. I remember back in the days when I was involved in some of these debates, I always wanted there to be a bell or something on the stage that would go off when a candidate was over his time, because it got the moderator out of the business of having to be the time police, which I think audiences probably find annoying, although what choice does a moderator have? I also occurred to me watching this debate that maybe the idea that most moderators have about having a list of questions and everything broken down into segments and so forth doesn't work very well. That maybe the better way to do it is to let them have at it and simply try to give each side equal time and let them fight over the issues they want to fight about.
Exactly.
So those are just a couple of random thoughts about a debate that I don't think is going to change the trajectory of this election. But it was certainly more issue-oriented and more informative than the prior one, where the candidates kind of ruined it for everybody.
Chris Wallace, there were a few points there where Kamala Harris kind of dodged some of the questions that were still lingering from the last debate, the question of packing the court. She also did not directly answer what, if any, restrictions she would place on abortion in California if Roe v. Wade was overturned. Just a couple of the times that I think some of those things landed without a finish. Your thoughts as you look back at tonight?
Oh, I think they both ducked a lot of questions, Martha.
Oh, here we go.
Well, she ducked
Jeffrey
the question
Epstein's
about what the
friend.
restrictions or lack of restrictions would be in California. Mike Pence said exactly the same on restrictions in Indiana. I thought that her worst refusal to answer was exactly as you say on the packing of the court, but I thought that Pence had an equally egregious refusal to answer when he was asked, what would you do about protecting people with pre-existing conditions, and he absolutely refused to even discuss the issue.
Because they already said this is not an issue.
Kamala Harris's best point was when she was going after President Trump and Mike Pence on health care and the effort to overturn Obamacare in the Supreme Court the week after the election. She said, if you have pre-existing conditions, they're coming after you. If you're one of the 20 million people on Obamacare, they're coming after you. If you're one of the people
more fear-mongering
26 or under who's on your family's
we
plan.
can see right through it.
On the other hand, that Pence was most effective when he went at Kamala Harris on the question of a left-wing agenda, that she and Biden would raise taxes as soon as they came in, and also that they would push their environmental, which he said, radical environmental agenda.
His voice sounds like an adolescent.
American workers.
Like a
13-year-old. Even night. I agree with Brit. I don't think it's going to change the narrative very much. I do want to say, though, it is the first debate I've ever seen
to be a boy or a
there was a bug crawling around on one candidate's head for about 2 or 3 minutes, and I don't think we can let this evening go without mentioning that.
Yeah, Kamala could have said something. It's like seeing somebody's zipper down. You tell them.
For Vice President Pence was
she saw
he articulated the takedown of al-Baghdadi and fighting ISIS, and his dismount was this president does not hesitate to act when he needs to. As the motorcade is leaving the hall here, both motorcades, we should say.
He did a great job.
Dan?
Well, first I'd say that Utah delivered what people said they wanted, which was a more genteel debate, a little bit more civil, and it's what you would expect when you come to Utah. I think Donna got her wish. It was a more boring debate, an uneventful inning, like no runs, no hits, no errors. But I agree that Mike Pence was able to defend President Trump's record. I thought that she had a very good portion of the debate when talking about COVID-19 and the pandemic. But Vice President Pence then dominated on the economy, taxes, energy, Also talking about China. I didn't think her answer on that was very good, and his was very pointed. And then when it came to foreign policy, I think it showed that he had so much more experience than she did on that score.
Oh yeah.
So, Donna,
Dominated.
obviously, during one point when they were talking about trade, talking about the USMCA, about the Paris Climate Accord, about China, Pence went back time and time and time again to sort of hold her to her record of voting against the USMCA.
Killed it.
Essentially, with their ticket, you're going to get a Green New Deal and a Paris Accord, and
Yup.
you're going to kill jobs. How effective do you think that was, and how well do you think she responded to that line of attack?
She couldn't respond.
Well, you know, Mike Pence,
Oh, he was a
he was back
Democrat.
in the Rose Garden saying, "Yes, President Trump, you've done such a wonderful job. Yes, Mr. President."
Here's the
doing
crazy
such a
Democrat who
terrific
gave
job."
Hillary
You know
her
what? I thought
email
she was-
answers.
She was graceful. She showed strength when she had to show strength. She did not interrupt him, but she reminded him that she had the clock and she was able to get out her information.
She's
made
probably
that
getting
the
paid by
American
Hillary
people
Clinton right
understand
now.
That the Trump-Pence administration has no plan for people with pre-existing conditions. So I believe she did a good job. Yes, it was boring, but boring in the sense that this was not about fireworks. It was about substance. And I think she was able to
DNC,
bring
Donna
home the substance.
Brazil.
So HU, you know, she did good.
She gave Hillary the
Part of
emails.
tonight's
She gave her the
challenge
answers.
for Kamala Harris was to introduce herself to the
I don't know why
American
they have
public
her
and
on this
possibly
show.
convince them that she could be commander-in-chief eventually. Part
Probably
of
to make
that
Juan
is to
Williams
be
feel
likable.
good.
Was she likable tonight in the cutaways and the reactions and how she handled it? And how did it play for you?
Yeah, well, if she was trying to, she failed at it. I'm not certain that was her goal. I think her goal was to do what her advisor told the press. She just has to go out, nail Pence to a wall, and walk off, leaving a trail of blood behind her. So if that was her mission, she didn't succeed at it.
No,
I'm
not
with,
at
I'm
all.
with Chris and Brit. I don't think this is going to change the direction of the debate, but I do think it gives a template for the Trump campaign if it's paying attention. Kamala Harris did a good job on health care. She did a good job on prosecuting the case on coronavirus. But Mike Pence did a good job of building a contrast, not only on COVID, but on taxes, packing the Supreme Court, energy, foreign policy, China. On each and every one of these, he's able to say,
Every
here's what we're
single
for, and here's what the other side
subject.
is. And in each
Killed
one of
it.
those, she got bollocksed up, some of them embarrassingly so. I mean, this is going to be a problem if they're not going to say what they're going to do about the Supreme Court. Eventually, people are going to say, "What are you hiding?" And they're going to
Exactly.
logically assume, as Pence suggested tonight, that the worst is behind that. So
Mike
no,
Pence
I don't
is
think
my
she did a good job of
homeboy.
making herself likable, and the scowls and the funny faces
Killed it.
were not that helpful. Dawn incidentally disagrees with me. She's waving her hand.
So, I mean,
We can see that.
Always
either that or she has a flaw in front of her. One of the two.
She's
Well,
not marrying you.
So, Juan, I thought it was the whole first part of the debate was really drilling down on COVID-19. And I thought one of the most difficult questions for Mike Pence, and I want to know how you thought he handled it, was what happened in the Rose Garden. I think it's a pretty tough question to answer when you've got 34 people at the White House who come down with COVID after an event like that. And of course, you can never pin it to any specific moment. But he basically said, the president trusts the American people to take care of their own health. That seemed like one of the more difficult moments for him.
Well, I agree, and I think that it was, again, evasive. So, I think the first half hour of this debate is when you had the biggest audience, most people paying attention, and I think she won, clearly, that part of the debate.
So you think everybody just fell asleep after the COVID talk? You're an idiot.
Vice President Pence's response was to say the American people have acted and that the Trump administration trusts the American people. He made it out to be that she was attacking the American people by calling the Trump administration to account for their failures. And I didn't think that was
you're
very
putting
attractive. I didn't
words
think
in
it was
people's
something that
mouths.
I would buy in the supermarket. I'd say, what are you kidding me? So I didn't see that at all. What I also noticed, and
You always
people
see a
mentioned this,
different
is that Susan
debate.
Page, the moderator, had to stop him at one point and say, Mr. Vice President, your campaign agreed to these rules. You've had most of the time. So to
You're a
me,
radical
that reminded
lefty.
people of what took place last week. And again,
Get the
that's
F
not
off
good
Fox
for
News.
the Trump campaign. I agree that when it comes to
Go to
evading
CNN.
answers, I thought that clearly Senator Harris evaded the
You're a
question about
virus.
attacking the court. But coming back to what you were talking about, Martha, what happened there in the Rose Garden, obviously, Vice President Pence had nothing to say. And I think that when you go along the line here and talk about people shifting topics, saying, well, I'm going to go back and answer another question, I think that clearly in that and the humanity that she displayed, introducing herself, her family, all very effective. I don't know that it changes much, but I thought she had a very good night.
Yeah, but you mean ineffective, yeah, you're right.
A debate is different than an interview. And it is, you get to control that 2 minutes of answer. And you can go back and answer the previous question and
Exactly.
then answer or not answer, depending on what you want to do. The people are watching either way.
Well, that's right, and I think it's glaring when you are so obviously evasive. Harris on the question of court packing, which was put to her repeatedly, and also Pence on the Rose Garden event, which is hard to defend, I suppose. And let's remember this: that there a certain number of people watch this debate. A lot more people will see the coverage afterwards, and their opinions of who won and lost, and the importance of it all will be shaped to a considerable extent by what they hear and see replayed. So, we at Fox will have our choice sound bites that we will use and we think are the most newsworthy. I can guarantee you that other news organizations may have an entirely different take on this, and it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out. And of course, it'll also be interesting to see what people thought of the questions that were asked. Did Kamala Harris get questioned as toughly as Mike Pence did? That will all be grist for the mill going forward.
Not a Brit Hume
I
fan,
think
but
it's
I
a
like
great
his
point. I mean, a
shirt.
lot of people watched some of the beginning of it and wondered, when there was going to be a tough question on the Harris side, and we did get some of those as it progressed. Frank Luntz is watching all of this along with us tonight, and he is an expert at
Cool,
getting a
what
sense
happened
of
to Frank
what everybody
Luntz,
else
man? He
thinks as they're watching
got a
this
big
debate
old
play out. Frank, good evening to you. Thanks for
beard.
being with us tonight.
We had a panel.
Yes, we did. We
Starting
had
to look more
15
like
swing
Andy
voters,
Rooney.
undecided voters from 8 different undecided states, and they gave us 3 conclusions, and Brett will show it on your show tomorrow. But the complaint about Elizabeth, about
Lord of the
Kamala
Rings
Harris
character.
was that she was abrasive and condescending. The complaint about Mike Pence was that he was too tired, but vice presidential or presidential. If this is a battle over style and substance, which is often the case with undecided voters, because they simply do not choose on policy, they also choose on persona, this was Mike Pence's night. I want to emphasize, it's not that Pence did so well.
Mike Pence is my homeboy.
They felt that both candidates were not answering the questions as well as they would have liked. They thought that Kamala made a greater effort to take down Donald Trump and the Trump-Pence administration, whereas Mike Pence did a better job.
She's been rehearsing for 4 years.
What the Trump-Pence administration had done. And third is that they were more upset with Kamala Harris's reactions to Pence, the smiling, the smirking, the scowling. They were angrier at that than they were that Mike Pence went over his time in almost every debate. I got to say one thing to Brit.
Exactly.
Voters do not like it when candidates run long. And when they run long every time, they think that that's an example of being undisciplined and unfocused. However, they were more agitated with Kamala's presentation than they were with Mike Pence not sticking to time.
Was there a policy issue, Frank, that stood out for them in this debate? I mean, obviously it covered a lot of territory.
Frank's the election go-to guy.
Well, the issue for them was not really policy. It was what Trump had done or not done, whether he was responsible or not responsible for the economy, whether he had done what he promised to do in COVID or had not. This is much more based on the Trump administration, and really it's a referendum. It's still a referendum on Donald Trump rather than a choice. And if the Trump campaign cannot change that from a referendum to a choice, I'm afraid that Donald Trump's going to have trouble on Election Day.
Frank, as you were watching your panel watch this, were there certain things that they seemed more animated about when they started hearing them go back and forth on it?
Yes, they did not. They really did not like the ducking of questions. But they were so much happier with this debate than they were the first one. The first one to them was embarrassing. This one, at least, they had the decorum. But the frustration, and I'm engaging in this chat constantly throughout the 90 minutes, The complaint was they're ducking the question. They're pivoting. And so they're responding to the strategy of the candidates as opposed to the policies of the candidates. And that's the responsibility of the moderator, and it's the responsibility of both candidates to tell the American people what they need to know to make a decision. This is clearly a better debate than the first one. But to our undecided voters, I agree also with Brit that I don't think this will change many minds. But I don't want to leave you without being clear that that Mike Pence was the winner of tonight's confrontation.
Yeah. Quickly, Frank, you say you've had 15 undecided voters from key battleground states. There are a lot of people looking at this election saying, are there undecided voters? A lot of them left?